Someone get this woman off my floor before she ruins the entire evening. I am paying $500 a plate, not watching charity cases stumble through my dinner. Marcus Caldwell did not lower his voice. He wanted the room to hear. He wanted the pregnant waitress on her knees wiping spilled water from the marble to hear. He wanted every person at every table in the Meridian to understand that in his world, weakness was not tolerated, poverty was not forgiven, and a trembling woman in a stained apron had absolutely no right to exist in his presence. The woman did not look up. She kept wiping the floor with a cloth that was already soaked, her other hand pressed instinctively against her belly, shielding what she carried inside. Her name tag said Rachel. Her hands said exhaustion. Her silence said she had been surviving things far heavier than this man's cruelty for a very long time. No one in the restaurant moved. No one spoke, except the man at table 9 who rose slowly from his chair, set his napkin on the table, and walked toward her with an expression that made the entire room go quiet. Not because they recognized him, but because the look on his face carried something rare and terrifying. The look of a man who had just seen a ghost he had been mourning for 35 years. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you absolutely cannot miss. The Meridian sat at the intersection of wealth and spectacle on Wilshire Boulevard in Beverly Hills. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city like a painting no one deserved. The chandeliers were Venetian crystal, imported piece by piece, assembled by hand. The wine list ran 47 pages. The waitstaff wore black and white uniforms pressed to perfection, and the hostess at the front podium had been trained to smile at millionaires and redirect anyone who looked like they might not be one. On this particular Saturday evening in November, the restaurant had been reserved entirely for the Children's Hope Foundation annual gala. 200 guests, 30 tables, a silent auction featuring artwork and vacation packages, and the kind of generosity that came with tax deductions and photographers. The guest list was a directory of influence. Studio executives, tech founders, real estate titans, and the occasional actor who believed in the cause enough to wear a suit. Keanu Reeves was one of those actors. He sat at table 9, near the back, where the lighting was softer and the conversation quieter. He was wearing a black tailored suit that his manager had insisted upon. White dress shirt beneath, unbuttoned at the collar, no tie. His dark hair fell to his shoulders with silver strands catching the candlelight. His 3-day stubble was neatly trimmed for once. His scuffed black boots had been replaced with polished dress shoes that he had already decided he hated. And on his left wrist, beneath the French cuff of a shirt that cost more than his first apartment's monthly rent, sat the same thin, faded woven bracelet he had worn for years. The one thing about him tonight that was real. Keanu did not enjoy galas. He attended them because the causes mattered and because saying no to sick children was not something he was capable of doing. But the performance of wealth made him uneasy. The careful laughter, the strategic seating, the way people touched his arm when they spoke as if physical contact with fame might transfer something useful. He had arrived early, spoken briefly with the foundation director, written a check that would not be announced because he had specifically requested it not be, and retreated to table 9 with a glass of water and a bread roll he had no intention of eating. His plan was simple. Stay through the speeches. Clap when appropriate. Leave before dessert. That plan ended at 7:43 when a waitress carrying a tray of water glasses passed his table and her hand trembled so violently that one glass tipped, spilling ice water across the white linen. Keanu looked up. The woman froze. She was in her early 50s, though exhaustion made her look older. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail that had loosened throughout the evening, strands falling around a face that was pale and drawn. Her uniform was one size too large, chosen deliberately. Beneath the oversized black vest and white shirt, the curve of her stomach was visible but disguised. She was pregnant, very pregnant, 8 months at least. She grabbed a cloth immediately, dabbing at the spill with practiced urgency. Her other hand stayed at her side, hovering near her belly, an instinct she could not suppress. "I am so sorry," she said quickly. "I will clean this right away." Her voice cracked on the last word. Not dramatically, just enough for Keanu to hear something beneath the apology. Something that sounded like a woman who had been apologizing for existing for a very long time. Keanu opened his mouth to say it was fine, that water was only water, that she should not worry. But before he could speak, he saw her face. Not the exhaustion, not the pallor, not the professional mask she had constructed to survive this evening. He saw her eyes. They were green, a particular shade of green that he had not seen in 35 years. The kind of green that belonged to summer afternoons in a cramped apartment in East Hollywood, where two teenagers who owned almost nothing had somehow convinced themselves they owned everything that mattered. Rachel. The name arrived in his mind before the recognition was complete. His body knew before his brain confirmed it. His hands went still. His breath caught. The bread roll he had been holding dropped silently onto the table. The woman named Rachel did not look at him. She was focused entirely on the spill, wiping quickly, efficiently, her eyes locked on the wet tablecloth as if her survival depended on erasing the evidence of her mistake before anyone important noticed. But someone important had already noticed. Marcus Caldwell, seated at table 3, the largest and most prominent table in the room, set down his champagne glass with a deliberate clink. He was 58 years old, silver hair, branstan, a charcoal suit that cost more than most people's cars, a gold watch that cost more than most people's houses. He owned commercial real estate in 11 cities and had a net worth that Forbes estimated at $3.2 billion. He was the evening's largest donor. He was also the evening's largest problem. Marcus had been watching Rachel since she started her shift. Not with concern, with irritation. Her presence offended him in ways he could not articulate and did not wish to examine. The visible pregnancy beneath the uniform, the careful way she moved, protecting her body while serving people who would never protect hers. Something about it made his chest tight and his temper short. When the water spilled, Marcus found his excuse. He pushed back his chair and raised his voice. Not to Rachel, to the room. Someone get this woman off my floor before she ruins the entire evening. He stood, adjusting his gold cufflinks with the calm precision of a man accustomed to being obeyed. I am paying $500 a plate, not watching charity cases stumble through my dinner. The room quieted. Forts paused. Conversations died mid-syllable. 200 pairs of eyes shifted between the billionaire and the pregnant waitress. Rachel's hands stopped moving. She knelt on the floor beside table 9, cloth pressed against the wet linen, and something behind her eyes closed like a door. Diane Mercer, the restaurant's floor manager, appeared within seconds. She was 45, precise, and terrified of losing Marcus Caldwell's patronage. The Meridian depended on men like Marcus the way buildings depend on foundations. Without them, the entire structure collapsed. Mr. Caldwell, I sincerely apologize, Diane said smoothly, placing herself between Marcus and Rachel. This will be handled immediately. She turned to Rachel. Her voice dropped to a hiss. Clean it up. Now. And if you cannot hold a tray, you should not be on this floor. Rachel stood slowly. The effort was visible. Her lower back protested. Her knees ached from the marble. The baby pressed against her ribs in a way that made breathing difficult. Yes, madam, Rachel said. Her voice was steady. Her hands were not. Marcus was not finished. He stepped closer, champagne glass in hand, and looked at Rachel the way a man looks at something that has interrupted his view. How far along are you? He asked. The question was not kind. It was an inventory. Rachel's jaw tightened. 8 months, sir. Marcus turned to Diane with theatrical disbelief. You hired a woman 8 months pregnant to serve a $500 gala? What is this, a shelter? Scattered laughter from the nearest tables. Nervous. Complicit. The kind of laughter that lets cruelty know it has an audience. Diane's face reddened. Rachel, go to the back. Take a break. I do not need a break, Rachel said quietly. I need to finish my shift. Marcus laughed. A short, sharp sound. Finish your shift? You can barely stand. He looked around the room, gathering witnesses for his performance. This is what happens when standards disappear. This is what happens when feelings replace professionalism. Rachel stood very still. Her hands hung at her sides. The wet cloth dripped on her shoes. She looked at Marcus Caldwell with an expression that was not anger and was not submission. It was something far more dangerous. It was the expression of a woman who had calculated the exact cost of responding and decided she could not afford it. She turned to walk away, and that was when Keanu Reeves stood up. The chair scraped against the marble. The sound was small, but the room was so quiet it carried to every table. Keanu walked toward Rachel. Not quickly, not dramatically, with the measured pace of a man who had made a decision and would not be redirected. He reached her before she reached the service door. He took his suit jacket off, the tailored black jacket his manager had spent 3 hours selecting, and placed it gently over Rachel's shoulders. The jacket was warm from his body. It covered her uniform, her apron, her name tag, the visible exhaustion of a woman working on her feet for 6 hours while carrying a child. Rachel turned. For the first time that evening, she looked directly at the man from Table 9. Their eyes met, and the 35 years between 1989 and tonight collapsed into a single second. She recognized him. Not the movie star, not the man on magazine covers. The boy from East Hollywood who used to steal sugar packets from the diner where they both worked because he could not afford coffee creamer. The boy who read poetry books he found in thrift stores and underlined passages that made him feel less alone. The boy who had once held her hand on a bus bench at 2 in the morning and said, "I think I'm going to be okay. I do not know how, but I think I am." Keanu, she whispered. The name escaped before she could stop it. A reflex. A time capsule breaking open. Keanu looked at her. His deep brown eyes held everything he could not say. 35 years of distance and fame and loss, and the particular kind of loneliness that comes from being surrounded by millions of people who know your name, but not your grief. He did not say her name back. He said something else. "You're done for tonight." Rachel shook her head automatically. "I cannot leave. I need the hours. If I leave early, they will dock my pay." "You are done," Keanu repeated. His voice was not loud. It carried the quiet weight of absolute certainty. He turned to Diane Mercer. "She will be paid for the full shift. I will cover the difference personally." Diane opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Marcus Caldwell's voice cut through from Table 3. "And who exactly are you to decide when the help goes home?" Keanu did not look at Marcus. He kept his eyes on Rachel. "She is not the help," he said. "She is a woman who deserves to sit down." Marcus scoffed. "This is a private event. You do not get to." "I donated more to this foundation tonight than your table's bar tab," Keanu said. Still not looking at Marcus. Still looking at Rachel. His voice did not rise. It did not need to. "So respectfully, I will decide whatever I need to decide to make sure this woman gets off her feet." The room went completely silent. Someone at table 12 recognized Keanu and whispered his name. The whisper spread like a wave. By the time it reached the back of the room, every person in the Meridian knew that the man standing between the billionaire and the pregnant waitress was Keanu Reeves. Marcus Caldwell's expression shifted, not to embarrassment, to calculation. He sat down slowly, adjusted his cuffs, and reached for his champagne. The performance was over. For now. Keanu turned back to Rachel. "Can you walk?" Rachel nodded. Her eyes were bright with something she refused to let fall. "I told you 35 years ago I would be fine," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm still fine." Keanu almost smiled. Almost. The corner of his mouth moved, but his eyes did not follow. "I know," he said. "That is what scares me." He walked beside her toward the service corridor. Not touching her, not guiding her, just present. The way a person walks beside someone they respect too much to lead. In the kitchen, Frank Morrison, the head chef, looked up from his station. Frank was 60 years old, built like a refrigerator, and had served 2 tours in the Marine Corps before discovering he preferred feeding people to fighting them. He had recognized Keanu the moment he walked in. Not from movies. From a veterans charity breakfast 3 years ago, where Keanu had sat on a folding chair and listened to 23 veterans tell their stories for 4 hours without checking his phone once. Frank said nothing. He pulled a stool from the corner, set it beside the prep counter, and placed a glass of water on the surface. Then he went back to his station. Rachel sat. The stool creaked. Her feet throbbed. The baby kicked hard against her ribs, and she pressed her palm against the spot, breathing through it. Keanu stood nearby, not hovering, just there. You should go back to the gala, Rachel said. You have a table. People. Your life. Keanu leaned against the counter. My table has bread rolls and a glass of water. I think I will survive the separation. Rachel almost laughed. Almost. The sound that came out was closer to a breath. She looked at him, really looked for the first time since the lobby. He was older. The silver in his hair was thick now. The lines around his eyes spoke of decades she had not witnessed. But the woven bracelet on his wrist was the same one she had made for him from embroidery thread in that apartment in East Hollywood. She was sure of it. The same faded pattern. The same loose weave. You still wear that, she said. Keanu glanced at the bracelet. His expression did not change. Is the only thing I own that someone made for me, he said. Everything else was bought. Silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable. Familiar. The kind of silence that exists between people who once shared a life small enough to fit in a single room and large enough to fill an entire memory. Your husband, Keanu said carefully. Where is he tonight? Rachel's face changed. The small light that had appeared when she recognized Keanu dimmed. Thomas is in the hospital, she said. St. Francis Medical Center. Spinal injury. He fell from a scaffold 6 months ago. Construction accident. The company's insurance denied the claim. Said he violated safety protocols. He cannot walk. Keanu absorbed this the way he absorbed all terrible information. Quietly. Completely. Without rushing to fill the silence with words that could not carry the weight. The baby, he said. Rachel placed both hands on her stomach. We did not plan this. At my age, the doctor said it was high risk. Thomas wanted me to rest. I wanted to rest. But the medical bills, the mortgage, Ben's tuition. Ben, our son, 24. He is finishing his degree at Portland State. Thomas and I agreed not to tell him how bad things are. We told him everything is fine. Rachel looked at the kitchen ceiling, blinking rapidly. Thomas used to carry everything. The bills, the repairs, the heavy things. Not because I asked him to, because that is who he is. He is the kind of man who gets up at 4 in the morning to fix a leaking faucet before anyone else wakes up so nobody has to worry about it. The kind who drives 40 minutes to bring me lunch at work because I mentioned once, that I forgot mine. He has been lying in that hospital bed for 6 months, and the first thing he asks every time I visit is whether I have eaten. Not whether his legs work. Whether I have eaten. Her voice broke on the last sentence. Not dramatically. The way a branch breaks under snow, slowly, with a sound so quiet you only hear it if you were standing close enough to care. Keanu did not move. He did not reach for her. He understood that Rachel was not a woman who needed to be held. She was a woman who needed to be heard. He sounds like someone worth fighting for, Keanu said. Rachel wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. He is everything. The 3 words landed in the kitchen like a prayer. Frank Morrison, pretending not to listen from his station, wiped his own eyes with his sleeve and continued chopping onions that did not need chopping. Keanu nodded. How long have you been working here? 3 weeks. I taught art at Jefferson Elementary for 11 years. They cut the program in September. Budget. She said the word the way people say the names of diseases, with familiarity and hatred. And the restaurant does not know you are 8 months pregnant? Rachel's eyes dropped. The apron hides it. Until tonight. Keanu was quiet for a moment. Then he asked the question that had been forming since he first saw her across the dining room. How did you end up here, Rachel? Rachel looked at her hands. The same hands that had once painted murals with children. The same hands that had mixed colors and clean brushes and held up drawings for small faces to admire. Now they smelled of bleach and dish soap and a chemical spray used to wipe down marble tables between courses. Thomas and I built something good, she said. Not fancy, not rich. Good. He worked construction. Y tot article. We had a little house in Glendale with a garden I planted myself. tomatoes, basil, sunflowers along the fence. Ben grew up in that garden. He used to eat the tomatoes straight off the vine before they were ready, and I would pretend to be angry. She smiled, the kind of smile that belongs to a memory too precious to share entirely. Thomas was the foreman on a commercial project downtown. High-rise, 32 stories. He had been doing that kind of work for 25 years without a single accident. Not one. He knew scaffolding the way I knew paintbrushes. Every bolt, every brace, every safety check. He used to say the scaffold talks to you if you listen. It tells you when something is wrong. Her voice shifted. Lower. Heavier. The company changed ownership in March. New management. New timeline. They cut corners everywhere. Thomas filed 2 safety reports about the scaffolding on the 14th floor. Both were ignored. The new project manager told him to stop making noise or find another job. Thomas had a mortgage and a pregnant wife and a son in college. So he went back to work. On June 17th, at 2:15 in the afternoon, the east section of the scaffold on the 14th floor collapsed. Thomas fell 3 stories. He hit a concrete platform, broke 4 vertebrae, shattered his pelvis. The doctors said it was a miracle he survived. Thomas said miracles were for people who did not have to learn to breathe through a tube. The company's insurance denied the claim within 2 weeks. Said Thomas had failed to follow standard operating procedure. Said the scaffold was compliant at the time of inspection. The revised report was clean. Perfect. The kind of perfect that only exists when someone has erased the truth and rewritten it. Rachel stopped. She pressed both hands against her belly. The baby moved, a slow roll that she tracked with her eyes, watching her own stomach shift beneath the uniform as if the child inside were trying to find a comfortable position in a world that had offered its mother none. I sold the car first, Rachel continued. Then the furniture we did not need. Then the furniture we did. I applied for every teaching position within 40 miles. Nothing. Budget cuts everywhere. Art is always the first thing they cut. As if beauty is a luxury children can afford to lose. She looked at Keanu with eyes that were not asking for pity. They were asking to be seen. I walked into the Meridian 3 weeks ago in a dress I borrowed from my neighbor and told Diane Mercer I had 10 years of restaurant experience. That was a lie. I waitressed for 2 years when I was 18. You know that because you were doing the same thing at the same diner. But I remember enough, and I needed the money badly enough to remember the rest. Keanu listened without moving, his body still, his eyes full. The tips here are good, Rachel said. On a good night, I make more in tips than I made in a week teaching. That is the part that breaks me, Keanu. Not the work, not the standing, not the aching. The fact that smiling at wealthy strangers and carrying their wine pays more than teaching their children how to see the world in color. In the dining room, the gala continued. Speeches were made. Donations announced. The silent auction concluded with a ski vacation in Aspen going for $47,000. Marcus Caldwell won 3 items without looking at any of them. He sat at his table, champagne in hand, the incident with the waitress already archived in the part of his brain labeled things that do not matter. Except it was not archived. It was circling. The image of the pregnant woman on the floor, wiping up water, one hand on her belly. The curve of her body beneath the uniform. The way she had stood when the man from Table 9 placed his jacket on her shoulders. Not with relief, with dignity. The image would not leave him. It pressed against something old and locked and dangerous inside Marcus Caldwell's chest. Something he had spent 32 years and $3.2 billion trying to bury. At 10:15, Keanu walked Rachel to the service entrance. The November air was cool against the sweat on her forehead. The parking lot behind the Meridian was empty except for delivery trucks and staff cars. Rachel's car, a 12-year-old sedan with a dented rear bumper, sat beneath a broken light. Keanu looked at the car, then at Rachel, then at the distance between the car and the hospital where her husband lay in a bed he could not leave. "Let me drive you," Keanu said. "I have been driving myself for 6 months," Rachel replied. "I know the route better than the ambulances." Keanu did not argue. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a card. His personal number, not the manager's. not the publicist's. His. This is my number, he said. If you need anything, medical bills, legal help, someone to sit with Thomas so you can sleep. Rachel looked at the card. She did not take it immediately. She studied it the way a person studies a rope thrown from a boat, calculating whether it is strong enough to hold or whether trusting it will make the drowning worse. You do not owe me anything, she said. We were kids, Keanu. That was a lifetime ago. Keanu's expression did not change. I'm not offering because I owe you. I am offering because 35 years ago, you shared your last box of cereal with me when I had not eaten in 2 days. And when I tried to thank you, you said it was just cereal. He paused. It was never just cereal, Rachel. And this is not just a card. Rachel took the card, slipped it into her apron pocket, got in her car, turned the ignition. The engine coughed once before catching. She rolled down the window. Keanu. He waited. She looked at him the way you look at a place you once lived. With tenderness. With distance. With the knowledge that you can never go back, but you're grateful it existed. You turn out okay, she said. Keanu watched her drive away. The taillights disappeared around the corner. He stood in the empty parking lot for a long time, his suit jacket missing, his dress shirt wrinkled, the November wind pushing through the thin fabric. Frank Morrison appeared at the service door. You need a ride? Keanu shook his head. I need a minute. Frank nodded. Take your time. Keanu stood in the parking lot and thought about cereal. About a 19-year-old girl who split her last meal with a hungry stranger and then insisted it did not matter. About how the smallest acts of generosity often come from people who have the least to give. And about how the world had rewarded that girl's kindness with a broken husband, a lost job, and a billionaire telling her she did not belong in his presence. That night, Keanu did not sleep. He sat on the floor of his house in the Hollywood Hills with his back against the wall and biscuit curled against his leg, and he read the Foundation's program booklet from cover to cover. Then he made a phone call. Samuel Graves was a private investigator who had worked with Keanu twice before, both times involving charity fraud that Keanu had uncovered and quietly reported. Samuel was 50, discreet, and understood that when Keanu called, it was never about celebrity problems. I need you to look into an insurance claim, Keanu said. Construction worker named Thomas Collins. Spinal injury. His company denied coverage. I want to know if the denial was legitimate or if someone decided it was cheaper to blame the worker than fix the scaffolding. Samuel took notes. Timeline? 6 months ago. St. Francis Medical Center. And the family? Wife is Rachel. She is 8 months pregnant and working as a waitress because the system crushed everything else. Keanu's voice was steady, but the words carried weight. I want the truth, Samuel. Not an opinion. Not a theory. The truth. By Monday afternoon, Samuel called back. The scaffolding was inspected 3 weeks before the accident, he said. The inspection report noted 2 structural deficiencies. The company acknowledged them internally, but delayed repairs because the project was behind schedule. When Thomas fell, they buried the original report and filed a revised version blaming operator error. Keanu listened. His jaw tightened. The woven bracelet on his wrist pressed against the edge of the desk. Can we prove it? The original inspector is willing to talk. He was fired 2 weeks after the accident. He has been carrying this for 6 months. Connect him with a lawyer. The best one. I will cover costs. And the family? Keanu paused. The family does not know I am involved. Not yet. Rachel has enough weight without adding obligation. Over the following weeks, the case moved forward through channels that Rachel could not see. An attorney named David Whitfield, one of the best personal injury lawyers in California, took the case pro bono after reviewing Samuel's findings. The original inspector, a man named Gerald Hoffman, agreed to testify. The insurance company received a formal challenge that arrived with enough evidence to make their legal department cancel lunch. Meanwhile, Keanu visited Thomas Collins. He went alone. No publicist. No camera. He wore a faded black t-shirt, jeans, and his scuffed boots. The woven bracelet. The duffel bag. He looked like a visitor, not a movie star, which was the point. Thomas Collins was 55 years old. Brown hair going gray. strong hands that no longer gripped anything. He lay in a hospital bed with a brace around his torso and a television remote he could barely reach. His room was shared with 3 other patients. The curtains between them were thin enough to hear everything and private enough to pretend you could not. Keanu knocked on the doorframe. Thomas looked up, confusion, then wariness, the expression of a man who had learned that strangers bearing kindness usually wanted something. Thomas Collins? Who was asking? Keanu pulled a chair beside the bed and sat down. He did not introduce himself by name. He did not mention Rachel. He said, "I heard about your accident. I am looking into the company that denied your claim. I think they buried the inspection report." Thomas stared at him. His jaw worked. His eyes, which had been dull with pain medication and despair, sharpened. "How do you know about that?" "Because I asked questions," Keanu said, and the answers did not match. Thomas was quiet for a long time. Then his eyes filled, not with tears of self-pity, with the particular kind of tears that come when a man who has been fighting alone discovers that someone else has picked up a weapon. "My wife," Thomas said. "Does she know?" "Not yet." Thomas nodded. "She will not accept charity. She is stubborn. The most stubborn woman I have ever met." Keanu smiled. "Small. Familiar." "I know," he said. "I knew her before you did." Thomas blinked. "Rachel never mentioned." "It was 35 years ago," Keanu said. "We were kids. Different lives. She chose you. She chose well." Thomas studied Keanu's face, then the woven bracelet on his wrist. Something clicked behind his eyes. Recognition, not of fame, of the bracelet. "She made that," Thomas said quietly. "She told me once. Years ago. She made a bracelet for a boy she knew when she was young. Said he probably lost it ages ago." Keanu looked at the bracelet. "I did not lose it." Something passed between the 2 men. Not jealousy, not competition, understanding. The understanding of 2 men who loved the same woman in different chapters of her life and recognized that love, when it is real, does not compete. It connects. Keanu visited Thomas 3 more times before the legal case broke open. Each visit lasted about an hour. They talked about construction, about motorcycles, about the particular frustration of being unable to move when your mind will not stop. Thomas never asked Keanu for anything. Keanu never offered more than presents. On the 4th visit, Thomas said, "She is due in 3 weeks." "I know." Thomas looked at the ceiling. "I cannot hold my daughter when she is born. I cannot stand beside Rachel. I cannot even sit up without someone cranking this bed." Keanu was quiet. Then he said, "You will be there. We'll find a way." Thomas shook his head. "The doctors say I am not ready for discharge. Then we bring the doctors to you. Or we bring you to the delivery room. There's always a way, Thomas. Always." Thomas's eyes filled again. "Why?" he asked. "Why are you doing this?" Keanu looked at the woven bracelet. "Because 35 years ago, your wife gave me her last box of cereal when I was starving. And when I tried to thank her, she said it was just cereal." He paused. "I spent 35 years trying to figure out how to repay something that was never about repayment. This is as close as I have come." The insurance case settled 4 days before Rachel's due date. The original inspection report surfaced. Gerald Hoffman testified. The company's legal team folded like a paper crane. The settlement was substantial enough to cover Thomas's medical care, the mortgage, Ben's remaining tuition, and a rehabilitation program at a facility that specialized in spinal recovery. Rachel learned about it from David Whitfield, the attorney, who called her on a Tuesday afternoon while she was folding laundry at the kitchen table. The laundry was Thomas's. She still washed his clothes every week and brought them to the hospital folded and smelling of the detergent he liked, the one with the blue cap, because maintaining small rituals was how she reminded both of them that normal still existed somewhere. "Mrs. Collins, the case has been resolved. Your husband's claim has been fully upheld. The company has accepted liability." Rachel sat down, then stood up, then sat down again. Her hands shook so badly, she had to put the phone on speaker and set it on the table. "How?" she said. "We could not afford a lawyer. We could not afford anything. An anonymous party retained counsel on your behalf. The legal fees have been covered." Rachel closed her eyes. The baby kicked. "Who?" I'm not at liberty to say. But Rachel already knew. She reached into her apron pocket, the one hanging on the hook by the door, and pulled out a card she had looked at every day for 3 weeks without calling. She sat with the card in her hand for a long time. She thought about pride, about the difference between charity and justice, about a boy who had once eaten sugar packet for breakfast because he could not afford food, and how that boy had grown into a man who understood poverty not as an abstraction, but as a memory that lived in his body. She understood then that Keanu had not done this to feel generous. He had done it because he remembered what it felt like to be hungry and invisible and one bad day away from losing everything. He had done it because he could not do it. She called. Keanu answered on the second ring. "You did this," Rachel said. It was not a question. "I made a phone call," Keanu replied. "The truth did the rest. I told you I did not need saving. You do not. Thomas's company needed to be held accountable. That is not saving. That is justice." Silence on the line. Rachel pressed her free hand against her belly. The baby was still, listening. "The bracelet," Rachel said. "You still wear it. Every day. Why?" "Because it reminds me where I came from. And where I came from includes you." Rachel exhaled, a sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite a cry. "I'm due in 4 days," she said. "I know. Thomas cannot be there. The doctors say he is not stable enough to transfer." "I will talk to his doctors," Keanu said. "If there is any way at all." That night, Rachel called Ben. She had rehearsed the conversation a dozen times, practicing the calm voice, the steady reassurance, the carefully edited version of events that would protect her son from the weight she had been carrying. But when Ben answered the phone, cheerful and unsuspecting, asking about the baby and whether Dad was feeling better, the rehearsal dissolved. She told him everything. The scaffold, the denied claim, the lost teaching job, the waitressing, the settlement. She told him about the nights she had driven home from the Meridian at midnight with her feet so swollen she had to take her shoes off to press the pedals. She told him about the morning she had found Thomas crying in his hospital bed, not from pain, but because he had calculated the cost of his own care and realized it exceeded everything they had saved in 25 years of marriage. Ben was silent for a long time. Then he said, "Mom, why did you not tell me?" "Because you were studying," Rachel said. "Because your father and I agreed that your future was the one thing we would not sacrifice. No matter what, I would have come home." "I know. That is exactly why we did not tell you." Ben's voice cracked. "I'm coming home now. Your finals are in 2 weeks. I do not care about finals." "Your father cares," Rachel said firmly. "And I care. You will finish. You will graduate. And when you come home, your father will be standing at the door. Because that is what Colin's men do. They stand up." The line went quiet. Then Ben said something that Rachel would carry for the rest of her life. "You are the strongest person I have ever known, Mom. And I am sorry I did not know that sooner." Rachel pressed the phone against her chest after the call ended and wept. Not the quiet, contained tears she had rationed throughout the months of crisis. The deep, shuddering kind that emptied everything and left behind something that felt, for the first time in 6 months, like relief. 3 days later, Keanu made it happen. A private ambulance, a specialized transport team, a portable bed that could be positioned beside Rachel's delivery room. The hospital administration resisted until Keanu sat in the chief of staff's office and explained, calmly and without raising his voice, that a man who had been injured by corporate negligence and denied insurance through fraud deserved to be present when his daughter was born. The chief of staff agreed. On a Wednesday morning in early December, Rachel Collins went into labor. The contractions started at 4 in the morning. Her neighbor Mercy, who had been helping with groceries and rides for months, drove her to the hospital. Thomas was already there, transported at 6, positioned in a wheelchair beside her bed with a brace around his torso and tears on his face before a single contraction had peaked. Rachel looked at Thomas. "You are here," she said. Thomas took her hand. His grip was weak, but his eyes were not. "I was not going to miss this," he said. "Someone made sure of that." Rachel smiled through the first wave of pain. She knew who. Keanu was not in the room. He was in the hallway, sitting on a plastic chair. wearing a faded black t-shirt, jeans, and his scuffed boots, the woven bracelet on his left wrist, a worn copy of Rilke in his duffel bag. He read while the sounds of delivery carried through the door. Nurses passed him without recognition. Visitors walked by without a second glance. He was just a man in a hallway, waiting. At 11:47 in the morning, the cry came. Strong, indignant. The cry of a human being announcing her arrival with absolute conviction that the world had been waiting for her. Keanu closed the book, set it in his bag, leaned his head back against the wall, and smiled. Not the small, tired smile, the real one, the one that reached his eyes and stayed. 20 minutes later, his phone buzzed. A message from Rachel. She is here. 7 pounds for ounces. Thomas is holding her. He's crying so hard the nurses are worried about his blood pressure. Her name is Grace. Thank you for everything. Keanu read the message 3 times. Then he typed back. You said you would be fine. You were right. He sat in the hallway for another 10 minutes. Then he stood, slung his duffel bag over his shoulder, and walked toward the exit. He did not go into the room. He did not ask to see the baby. He did not insert himself into a family moment that belonged to Rachel and Thomas and Grace. Because that is who Keanu Reeves is. He shows up. He does what needs to be done. And he leaves before the gratitude becomes about him. But this story does not end with a birth. It ends with a question. Marcus Caldwell did not forget the night at the Meridian. He tried. He played golf. He closed deals. He flew to New York for meetings that could have been emails. But the image of the pregnant woman on the floor would not release him. It clung to the inside of his eyelids like a photograph burned into film. He told himself it was irritation. He told himself the woman had been unprofessional, that his reaction was proportional, that standards existed for a reason. But at 3 in the morning, when the penthouse was dark and the city glittered below like a circuit board, the truth crept in on quiet feet. He was not angry at Rachel Collins. He was angry at what she reminded him of. Emily Renee Caldwell. Maiden name, Baker. Born in a small town in central Ohio where the cornfields outnumbered the people and the sunsets lasted long enough to believe in God. She had auburn hair that caught every kind of light. She laughed in a way that started in her stomach and ended in her eyes. She could not cook, but insisted on trying. She read mystery novels in the bathtub. She was the only person who ever called Marcus by his middle name, James, because she said it sounded like the man he really was beneath the ambition. They married young. Marcus was 26 and already building his first commercial property. Emily was 25 and 3 months pregnant with a baby they had not planned, but welcomed with the kind of joy that made planning seem ridiculous. The pregnancy was difficult. Emily was sick often, tired always, but she glowed in a way that had nothing to do with health and everything to do with purpose. She would rest her hands on her belly and say, "She is going to be extraordinary, James. I can feel it." At 8 months, Emily's blood pressure spiked. The doctors recommended bed rest. Emily, being Emily, rested for exactly 2 days before reorganizing the nursery, painting the walls a shade of yellow she called mourning, and writing a list of names that covered 3 pages of notebook paper. Lily, she decided on a Tuesday. Her name is Lily, like the flower, because flowers do not ask for permission to bloom. On the night of March 15th, Emily went into labor. The delivery was long, 16 hours. Marcus paced the waiting room, wearing a groove into the linoleum, calling the nurse every 30 minutes until they asked him to please sit down. At 4 in the morning, the doctor came out. The doctor's face said everything before his mouth did. Complications. Hemorrhaging. They had done everything they could. Emily was gone. But the baby was alive. Marcus walked into the room. Emily lay on the bed, still and pale, her auburn hair spread across the pillow like autumn leaves on water. In a bassinet beside her, a baby cried. Small, red-faced, fierce. Marcus looked at his wife, then at his daughter, then at the space between them that was supposed to hold a future and now held only absence. He touched Emily's hand. It was still warm. He pressed it against his cheek and made a sound that the night nurse would later describe as the most broken thing she had ever heard from a living person. He did not hold Lily. He could not. Every time he looked at the baby, he saw Emily's face and the particular cruelty of a universe that demanded a mother's life as payment for a daughter's first breath. His sister, Margaret, took Lily home. He is just in shock, Margaret told the family. He will come around. He did not come around. Marcus threw himself into work with the desperate energy of a man running from fire. He built buildings, acquired properties, expanded into markets that other developers avoided. He worked 18-hour days and slept in his office and accumulated wealth the way some people accumulate scar tissue, layer by layer, protection against a wound that never healed. Lily grew up calling Margaret Mom. She had Emily's auburn hair and Marcus's stubborn jaw. She graduated from college, got married, had a son of her own. Marcus received updates through Margaret. He read them. He did not respond. He sent money. He did not send himself. 32 years. More than 11,000 days without holding the daughter his wife had named after a flower, because flowers do not ask permission to bloom. And on a Saturday night in November, Marcus Caldwell sat at a $500 table and screamed at a pregnant woman because her existence reminded him of everything he had lost and everyone he had failed. 3 weeks after the Meridian Gala, Marcus drove to Griffith Observatory. He did not know why, or rather, he knew and refused to admit it. This was where he had proposed to Emily. On the observation deck, with the city spread below them like a promise, he had knelt on one knee and said, "I do not have much, but everything I build from this day forward will be for you." He sat on a bench overlooking the city. The December wind carried the smell of sage and dust. He sat for a long time, alone, a billionaire on a public bench, indistinguishable from any other man trying to remember who he was before the world made him into someone else. Keanu found him there, not by accident. Frank Morrison, the chef at the Meridian, had mentioned that Marcus Caldwell had been returning to the restaurant every night for 2 weeks, sitting alone at the bar, ordering nothing, and leaving before closing. Frank had also mentioned that Marcus had asked the bartender quietly and with no explanation whether the pregnant waitress was okay. Keanu sat down on the bench beside Marcus. The city sparkled below. Neither spoke for a full minute. Then Keanu asked the question. What was her name? Marcus went rigid. His hands, resting on his knees, curled into fists. His breathing changed. What? The woman you lost, Keanu said quietly. The one you see every time you look at a pregnant woman and cannot breathe. What was her name? Marcus turned to Keanu with an expression that cycled through fury, shock, and something that looked dangerously close to collapse. How? How did you? Keanu looked at the city. I know what grief looks like when it turns into cruelty. I have seen it. I have worn it. A man who screams at a pregnant stranger is not angry at the stranger. He is angry at something the stranger reminds him of. Marcus's jaw trembled. His gold watch caught the observatory light. His $3.2 billion posture began to crack. Her name, Keanu said again. Gently, not a demand. An invitation. Marcus closed his eyes. His lips moved. No sound came out. Then, barely audible, a whisper carried on the December wind. Emily. Her name was Emily. The name opened a door that had been locked for 32 years. Behind it was not the billionaire. Behind it was a 26-year-old man in a hospital room, holding his dead wife's hand against his cheek, unable to look at the baby in the bassinet because the baby was proof that the person he loved most in the world was gone. Tell me about her, Keanu said. Marcus broke. Not the way billionaires break on television, with restrained tears and dignified pauses. The way humans break, with his face in his hands and his shoulders heaving and sounds coming out of him that had been stored in a sealed room for 32 years, accumulating pressure until the walls could no longer hold. He told Keanu everything. About the auburn hair, about the laughter that started in her stomach, about the yellow nursery and the name Lily and the night the doctor came out with that face, about the baby he could not hold, about the sister who raised his daughter, about the 11,000 days of silence. When he finished, The city had shifted beneath them. Lights had changed. Traffic had moved. The world had continued while Marcus Caldwell sat on a bench and said his wife's name for the first time in 3 decades. Keanu sat beside him through all of it. He did not interrupt. He did not offer advice. He did not tell Marcus that everything would be okay. He simply listened. The way a person listens when they understand that sometimes the most powerful thing you can give another human being is the space to say the thing they have been carrying alone. When the silence returned, Keanu spoke. The woman at the restaurant. Rachel. She is not Emily. But you looked at her belly and you saw everything you lost. And instead of sitting with that pain, you punished her for causing it. Marcus's breath shuddered. I know. She has a husband who cannot walk, Keanu continued. A son she's putting through college. She was working at 8 months pregnant because the world took everything else and she refused to stop. She's the bravest person in that room. And you told her she did not belong there. I know, Marcus said again. His voice was raw, stripped. The voice of a man who had been dismantled and did not know how to reassemble. Your daughter is 32, Keanu said. She has Emily's hair. She named her son James. Marcus looked up sharply. How do you? I asked, Keanu said simply. I ask questions. It is what I do. Marcus stared at him. His eyes red, his face wrecked, his billion-dollar armor scattered on the bench beside him. She named him James, Marcus repeated. My middle name. Keanu nodded. She knows your name? Marcus. She has always known. The question is whether you are ready to know hers. Marcus pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes. How do I? After 32 years. How do I even begin? Start with the truth, Keanu said. The same way you just told me about Emily. Tell Lily about the night she was born. Tell her about the yellow nursery and the name from the flower. Tell her you were not strong enough to stay, but that it was never because you did not love her. It was because you loved her mother so much that looking at the proof she ever existed was more pain than you could survive. Marcus sat very still. The city hummed below. The December wind carried the scent of sage. And Rachel? Marcus said quietly. Rachel does not need your money, Keanu said. She does not need your apology performed for an audience. She needs you to understand that what you did in that restaurant was not about standards or professionalism. It was about a man who could not bear to see life where he had only experienced loss. If you understand that, really understand it, then the apology will mean something. If you do not, keep your words. They will only make things worse. Marcus nodded. Slowly, the way a man nods when he has been given directions to a place he has been avoiding for 32 years and finally accepts he must go. Keanu stood, picked up his duffel bag. The woven bracelet caught the last light. Emily sounds like she was extraordinary, Keanu said. Marcus looked up. She was, he said. She really was. Keanu walked away down the observatory path. His boots crunched on the gravel. His duffel bag swayed. He did not look back. It took Marcus Caldwell 6 weeks. 6 weeks of writing letters to Lily and tearing them up. 6 weeks of driving to her neighborhood and sitting in his car and driving away. 6 weeks of therapy sessions where he sat in a chair and said Emily's name until it stopped tearing his chest open. The first letter was 3 pages long. He wrote it at his desk at 2 in the morning, filling the pages with explanations and justifications and the kind of careful language a businessman uses when negotiating a deal. When he read it back, he realized it sounded like a legal brief. He tore it up. The second letter was 1 paragraph. It said almost nothing. He tore that up too. The third letter he wrote drunk. It was honest and raw and desperate, and the handwriting deteriorated into something unreadable by the second page. He woke the next morning, read it, and burned it in the kitchen sink. His therapist, a woman named Dr. Helen Porter, who had the patience of a geologist and the directness of a surgeon, sat across from him 3 times a week and waited. She did not rush him. She did not offer platitudes. She asked questions. When was the last time you said Emily's name before that night at the observatory? Marcus thought. The silence stretched for nearly a minute. I do not remember, he said finally. I removed her name from everything. My biography, my company history, my conversations. I built my entire life around the absence of her name. And what was in that absence? Marcus looked at his hands. The gold watch, the manicured nails, the hands that had built $3 billion worth of buildings and could not hold a baby. Nothing, he said. The absence was filled with nothing. And I covered the nothing with money. On the fourth week, Marcus drove to Lily's neighborhood in Pasadena. He parked across the street from a modest house with a red door and a tricycle on the front porch. He watched through the windshield as a woman with auburn hair stepped outside, holding a 3-year-old boy by the hand. The boy was wearing rubber boots and jumping in a puddle from last night's rain. The woman laughed, the same laugh Emily had, the kind that started somewhere deep and rose until it filled the air around her. Marcus gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles went white. He sat there for 20 minutes. Then he drove away. He drove to the cemetery where Emily was buried. He had not visited in 29 years. The headstone was simple. Emily Renee Caldwell, beloved wife, beloved mother. The grass around it was maintained by the cemetery, not by him. There were no flowers, no evidence that anyone had stood here and remembered. Marcus knelt on the grass. His suit got dirty. He did not care. He placed his hand on the stone and said her name. Emily, I am so sorry. I am sorry I left Lily. I am sorry I left you. I am sorry I built buildings when I should have built a family. He stayed until the sun went down. When he stood, his knees ached and his face was wet, and something inside him that had been rigid for 32 years had begun, very slowly, to bend. On a Sunday morning in January, he wrote a letter he did not tear up. Dear Lily, your mother's name was Emily. She had auburn hair, and she laughed in a way that started in her stomach. She painted your nursery yellow because she called it the color of mourning. She chose your name because she said flowers do not ask permission to bloom. She died the night you were born, and I have spent 32 years unable to look at you because every time I see your face, I see hers. That was my failure, not yours, never yours. Your son's name is James. That is my middle name. The fact that you gave it to him tells me you have been reaching for me your whole life, and I have not been there to reach back. I am reaching now. If it is too late, I understand. But I want you to know that Emily would have been proud of you. And I am too, even though I have no right to be. Lily called 3 days later. The conversation lasted 4 hours. Marcus sat on the floor of his penthouse, the same floor he had paced for 32 years, and told his daughter about her mother. Every detail, every memory, every yellow wall, and every mystery novel in the bathtub. When Lily said, I wish I had known her, Marcus replied, she is in everything you do. You just did not have anyone to tell you that. Until now. 2 months later, Marcus Caldwell stood in a private room at the Meridian and apologized to Rachel Collins in person. Not publicly, not with cameras. In a quiet room with Rachel, Thomas in his wheelchair, and Keanu standing near the door. Mrs. Collins, Marcus said. His voice was steady, but his hands trembled. What I said to you that night was unforgivable. You were doing the bravest thing anyone in that room was doing. You were working. You were carrying life. And I punished you for it because your courage reminded me of someone I lost and something I was too broken to face. Rachel looked at him. She did not smile. She did not cry. She studied his face the way she had once studied her students' drawings, looking not for perfection, but for honesty. What was her name? Rachel asked. Marcus blinked, surprised by the question, then not surprised at all. Emily, he said. Her name was Emily. Rachel nodded. Tell me about her. And Marcus Caldwell, the man who had screamed at a pregnant waitress for spilling water, sat in a chair in a quiet room and told a stranger about the woman he had loved and lost. And Rachel listened. The way a person listens when they understand that forgiveness is not a gift you give the person who hurt you. It is a door you open, so neither of you has to keep standing in the hallway. When Marcus finished, Rachel said, You should meet your granddaughter someday. She is 3 months old. Her name is Grace. Marcus's eyes filled. Grace, he repeated. Thomas spoke from his wheelchair for the first time. His voice was rough but clear. My wife taught me something a long time ago. She said people do not break because they are weak. They break because they carried something too heavy for too long without anyone helping. He looked at Marcus. You carried Emily alone for 32 years. That is not weakness, sir. That is the heaviest thing I have ever heard. Marcus looked at Thomas Collins, at the brace around his torso, at the wheelchair, at the hands that could not grip. And he understood, with a clarity that cut through 3 decades of armor, that suffering does not belong to the wealthy or the poor. It belongs to everyone. And the only thing that separates cruelty from compassion is whether you carry your pain toward others or set it down long enough to see theirs. Rachel looked at Keanu by the door. He was leaning against the frame, arms crossed, the woven bracelet visible below his sleeve. He did not speak. He did not need to. His presence was the thread that connected everything. The cereal in East Hollywood, the bracelet on his wrist, the question on a bench at Griffith Observatory. The man who shows up, does what needs to be done, and leaves before the gratitude becomes about him. 1 year later, Marcus Caldwell established the Emily Caldwell Foundation. Free prenatal care for uninsured pregnant women. Legal aid for workers denied coverage through corporate fraud. A scholarship fund for children of injured laborers. The first grant recipient was a rehabilitation center in Los Angeles that specialized in spinal recovery. Thomas Collins completed his treatment there. He walked out of the building on a Tuesday morning in October, holding a cane in one hand and Rachel's hand in the other. Grace sat in a stroller between them, chewing on a stuffed rabbit, blissfully unaware that the world had once tried very hard to crush the people who loved her most. The walk from the rehabilitation center to the car was 47 steps. Thomas counted every one, not because the physical therapist had told him to, but because 6 months ago a doctor had told him he might never take a single step again, and Thomas Collins was the kind of man who answered predictions with proof. Rachel walked beside him. She did not rush him. She did not steady him. She let him walk at his own pace, the way Keanu had once walked beside her through a restaurant service corridor, not leading, just present. She had learned something that year about the difference between helping and hovering. Helping respects the person. Hovering replaces them. At step 31, Thomas stopped. His legs trembled. His grip on a cane tightened. Rachel waited. "You good?" she asked. Thomas looked at her, at the woman who had waitressed at 8 months pregnant so he could keep his hospital bed, at the woman who had sold their furniture and hidden the truth from their son and stood on a marble floor while a billionaire called her a charity case and never once, not once, complained about the unfairness of it. "I am standing," he said, "because of you. I am good." They reached the car. Rachel opened the door. Thomas lowered himself into the passenger seat with a grunt of effort and a sigh of triumph. Grace gurgled from the stroller, reaching for his hand. Thomas let her grab his finger. Her grip was fierce, like her mother's. Ben was waiting at the house when they arrived. He had graduated from Portland State 2 months earlier, summa cum laude, and had turned down 3 job offers to come home. He stood on the front porch, the same porch where Rachel's tomato plants had once grown, and watched his father walk up the path with a cane and a determination that made the cane seem decorative. Ben did not run to him. He waited. He understood, because Rachel had taught him that a man's dignity is not something you protect by rushing to his aid. It is something you honor by trusting him to reach you on his own. Thomas climbed the 3 porch steps. 1, 2, 3. He reached the top and looked at his son. "I told your mother I would be standing at this door when you came home," Thomas said. Ben's eyes filled. His jaw tightened. He nodded once, the way men nod when speaking would destroy the composure they need to maintain. Then he hugged his father, carefully, firmly, the way you hold someone who nearly disappeared from your life and arrived back through a combination of medicine and stubbornness and a love so persistent it refused to accept any outcome that did not include this exact moment on this exact porch. At the Foundation's inaugural event, Marcus stood at the podium. He did not wear his gold watch. He wore a simple suit, no cufflinks. He spoke for exactly 3 minutes. "My wife's name was Emily. She died giving life. I spent 32 years punishing the world for that instead of honoring her. This foundation exists because a man I did not deserve to meet sat beside me on a bench and asked me the simplest question anyone has ever asked. He asked me her name, And when I said it, something that had been locked for 3 decades finally opened. In the back of the room, Keanu sat in the last row. Faded black t-shirt, jeans, boots, woven bracelet. He clapped when it was appropriate. He left before dessert. Frank Morrison found him outside, beside a delivery truck, drinking a glass of water the kitchen staff had brought him. "You could sit at a real table, you know," Frank said. Keanu smiled. "I like it here." Frank stood beside him. 2 men outside a building full of important people, drinking water beside a delivery truck. "You want to know something?" Frank said. "I have been cooking for 30 years. I have fed millionaires, presidents, people whose names are on buildings. But the best meal I ever served was scrambled eggs to a man in a janitor's vest at the Morrison Grand." Keanu laughed. A real laugh. The kind that reached his eyes and stayed. "Scrambled or fried?" Keanu asked. Frank raised his glass. "Scrambled. Always scrambled." They stood there as the evening settled. The kitchen door was propped open. The sound of applause drifted through. The smell of dessert, something with chocolate and orange, carried on the warm air. Frank leaned against the truck and crossed his arms. "Can I ask you something?" Frank said. Keanu nodded. "You wore a janitor's vest for a stranger at the Morrison Grand. You sat in a hospital hallway while a woman you have not seen in 35 years gave birth. You drove to an observatory to sit with a man who humiliated someone you care about. And now you're standing in a parking lot eating nothing, while 200 people inside would give anything for 5 minutes with you." Frank paused. "What drives that?" Keanu thought about it. Not quickly. He gave the question the respect it deserved. "When I was 19, he said, I had nothing. No money, no career, no family nearby. I had a job bussing tables and a girl who shared her cereal with me and a bracelet she made from thread. And I remember thinking, this is enough. This moment, this person, this meal we cannot really afford. This is enough." He looked at the bracelet. "Somewhere along the way, the world gave me everything I did not ask for. Money, fame, recognition. And it took the thing I actually had. Simplicity, connection, the feeling of sitting across from someone who sees you, not the version of you on a screen, but the actual you. The hungry one, the scared one, the one who does not know if tomorrow will be better." He paused. "So when I see someone in that place, the place I used to live, I do not see a stranger. I see myself. And the only thing I know how to do with that recognition is show up. Not to save anyone, just to be in the room, or the hallway, or the parking lot, wherever the real things are happening, because the real things never happen on stage. They happen in kitchens and corridors, and hospital rooms, and park benches. They happen where nobody is watching. And that is where I want to be." Frank was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "You know, for a famous person, you are remarkably bad at being famous." Keanu laughed. "Thank you. That is the best compliment I have received all year." They stood there as the evening settled. Inside, Marcus Caldwell was shaking hands and learning how to say Emily's name without flinching. His daughter Lily stood beside him, auburn hair catching the light. Her 3-year-old son James pulling at Marcus's trouser leg and calling him Papa for the first time. Marcus looked down at the boy, picked him up, and held him the way he should have held Lily 32 years ago. The way he would hold everyone from now on. Like they mattered. Because they did. Somewhere across the city, Rachel sat on the porch of a house with a paid mortgage, rocking Grace to sleep. Thomas sat beside her. Walking cane leaned against the railing, his hand resting on her knee. The November air carried the smell of jasmine from the garden Rachel had planted last spring. The first garden she had planted since losing her teaching job. The first thing she had grown in a year that was not survival. Ben called from Portland. His voice was bright. He had finished his degree. He was coming home for Thanksgiving. He did not know how close the family had come to losing everything. He only knew that when he asked his mother how things were, she said the same thing she always said. "We are fine, sweetheart. We're just fine." And for the first time in a long time, it was true. Somewhere on a canyon road above the city, Keanu Reeves rode his motorcycle through the November twilight. The wind carried the scent of sage and eucalyptus. Biscuit was at home, probably asleep on the couch, probably on top of a stolen sock. The woven bracelet on his left wrist vibrated gently in the wind. A faded thing made of embroidery thread by a 19-year-old girl who had shared her last box of cereal with a hungry boy 35 years ago and never expected anything in return. He thought about Rachel, about Thomas, about Grace, about Marcus and Emily and Lily in a yellow nursery painted the color of mourning, about how the heaviest things in the world are not made of steel or stone, but of the names we refuse to speak and the people we refuse to face and the love we bury, because surviving the memory of it seems harder than surviving the loss. What was her name? The simplest question in the world, and the one that unlocked everything. Because names carry the people we have lost, and speaking them aloud is how we bring them back. Not to life, but to light. Emily. Her name was Emily, and she would have been so proud. Thank you for following this story. Let us know in the comments below. If this story has moved you and you would like to stand with us in bringing more voices of truth and hope to light, please consider supporting our work. Even the smallest gift helps us continue creating and sharing these powerful stories. You can find the donate link in the description. And of course, do not forget to subscribe so you will not miss the next chapter we are preparing for you.